Good afternoon, everybody. You are all very welcome to today's Thekla Talk. My name is Philip McGrath and I lead the delivery of the Public Service Transformation Programme, Better Public Services. Our vision for that programme is to deliver inclusive, high quality and integrated public services that meet the needs and crucially improve the lives of the people of Ireland. For those of you who are not familiar with this initiative, Thekla Talks is a seminar series hosted by the Department of Public Expenditure, NDP Delivery and Reform, which presents a variety of different policy and research topics for discussion. The series is named in honour of Thekla Beer, who was a pioneer for the women of Ireland. Thekla Beer was the first woman to head up an Irish government department, becoming Secretary of the Department of Transport and Power in 1959. And she also chaired the first commission on the status of women in 1970, which provided a model for change in equal pay and the removal of the civil service marriage bar and the introduction of the widow's pension. I think it's fair to say that Thekla Beer paved the way for generations of women who came after her. And as this seminar series enters its third year, it seeks to honour her contribution to Ireland and to continue supporting the ongoing need for fresh thinking and new insights into policy crafting in our country. Minister Donoghue is now going to give a short introductory message outlining the context of today's session. Emer, over to you and Minister Donoghue.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really pleased to welcome you to this session of the Department's Thekla Talks series, which is focused on the theme of AI from legislation to implementation. There is an increasing and necessary focus on the impact that artificial intelligence is going to have on us as a country, and it's particularly vital that the public service is prepared and equipped to deal with the implications, both positive and negative, that AI will bring. Thekla Talks offer a really important space for experts to engage with and grapple with some of the most complex areas of Irish public policy. They also offer the chance for both public servants and wider society to ask questions and explore how an issue may affect them. I know this is going to be an interesting and important discussion, and I would encourage you to engage, to ask questions and participate. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed the session.
Thank you, Minister Donoghue. As the Minister said, today's focus is on artificial intelligence and more specifically, what we need to consider when introducing and integrating AI solutions in our public service. And of course, the safeguards that we need to put in place to ensure the appropriate, ethical and secure use of AI. So today we are joined by 4 experts in the area of AI who are going to share their own insights and perspectives on this enabling technology and how we can use it to transform public service delivery. I also hope that they will share with us their own, maybe their own hopes, fears and ambitions around AI, how we can build trust in its use, and of course, how we can ensure that we adhere to the forthcoming legal obligations arising from the EU AI Act. And this is really a landmark piece of legislation that strives to ensure that the AI systems that we use, that they're safe, that they respect the fundamental rights and the EU values that we all cherish and are in fact the foundation of our union. And to do this in a way that supports and encourages innovation in our services and fosters continued investment and economic growth. So just a little bit of housekeeping. Today's session is going to last approximately an hour and a half, and I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves and provide an overview of their area of practice in terms of AI. Once all of our panelists have introduced themselves and set the scene, we're then going to move into a panel discussion. I would ask you all to put your questions into the Q&A or chat box, and we will pick a couple of questions then and put them to the panel. Please also share any comments or suggestions or concerns you might have in relation to the commissioning of AI in our public service. I just wanted to mention that our fantastic colleagues over in the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment are working diligently on preparations for the implementation of the AI Act and what it means for public bodies and indeed industry organisations in Ireland. They will begin to engage with public bodies in the coming weeks and months on this. Just a reminder to you all as well that we are recording this session and we will make it available shortly after today's today's module. So please feel free to circulate this afterwards to colleagues who might be interested in the discussion that we had today. So So I'm gonna start off by asking Frankie Kay, the CIO of the Central Statistics Office, to just give a brief introduction and why you're here and what you're interested in, Frankie.
Hi, thank you very much for inviting me on the panel. It's great to be here with such other fantastic people. So as Philip mentioned, I'm the Chief Information Officer at the Central Statistics Office, but I also look after data science. We've just set up a new data science team, which broadly incorporates aspects of data science, but also AI and machine learning. I'd say AI and machine learning is quite a hot topic within other national statistics institutes, as of course it is with many other sectors that you all work in. And an example would be that the CSO is leading a consortium for Eurostat, which is the European Statistical Systems Organisation, to actually set up a one-stop shop for AI and machine learning for official statistics. So that's really trying to provide a whole centre of resources, best practice, methodologies, frameworks, but also to carry out a number of use cases, so real live examples of how we can use AI and machine learning, and then more importantly, then take that and actually use them in production of data and statistics. Within the CSO, we do use AI and machine learning. One example is during the COVID crisis, we started web scraping off the site rip.ie because we needed to get as most up-to-date statistics on deaths and excess deaths as well, and the official data flows take a little longer. So we web scraped that site. We used AI machine learning to apply models. So for example, people will post on RIP for people that don't live in Ireland. So we needed to make sure that we excluded those from our figures. So that's a real live example of how we've used AI in a really important policy area for Ireland. I'd say the introduction of ChatGPT has been a complete game changer. I think it just has really added to the interest around it, the buzz around it. But with that, it does then come in challenges as well. We're using it fairly slowly to start with to help us with coding and also to improve the search on our website. So in terms of potential, it's almost endless. For us at the CSO, we want to use it to help with other sources, so we don't have to always go out for surveys. How can we find out data in other places? But there are challenges with it as well, and I think some of the key ones are bias. We're very concerned about that data set and does it properly represent the whole of the society in Ireland? And I think that's something that we have to be incredibly mindful, not just in terms of the data, but the people programming it who have their own bias ultimately as well. The quality of data, if you get not very good quality data, you're not going to get very good quality models. So that's very important. And also there's a real challenge of keeping these models up to date. It takes a lot of time and effort to create them and then a lot of time to keep them up to date as well. Another key aspect for us is sort of ethics. CSO, it's all about keeping your data confidential and secure, and making sure that what we produce is for the public good. And just because you can do something legally doesn't necessarily mean that you should. So I think having right ethics frameworks in place in terms of how we use it is incredibly important. And as an aspect of that, I think is one of the key things is being really transparent about what we're doing, how we're using it, and the CSO is looking to create something, possibly you might call it a trust centre, we're not quite sure of the name, but that's being very clear, telling people what we're doing, how we're using their data, so that we can provide that, keep that trust that we have from people that provide their data for us as well. So those would be some of the key aspects for us from a statistical point of view.
Thanks a million, Frankie. I'm going to hand over now to Barry Scannell. Barry's a consultant in William Fry, so take it away there, Barry.
Hi, everybody. First of all, thanks so much for inviting me to speak today. I'm absolutely delighted to be here talking to so many people. I didn't realize so many people would be here, but it's great because it's really indicative of the interest in the area So I'm a solicitor in William Fry's technology group. I'm specializing in artificial intelligence. I got into it before it was cool. I think it was about 2016, the early days of generative AI with the next Rembrandt. There was a painting that AI was able to create, and there was a Beatles song called, well, not quite the Beatles song, it was trained in Beatles music, called Daddy's Car, which if anyone is interested, it's on YouTube. It's not very good. It sounds like something maybe Ringo would have written, but I was the Director of Legal Affairs and Regulatory Compliance in IMRO, the Irish Music Rights Organisation. So I got into AI via the music industry. So I was on the representative body for Europe, GSAC. I was on their legal committee around the time we were lobbying hard for the copyright directive. And Article 4 of that directive obviously deals with text and data mining and web scraping and all of that. And that's how I started. And then CSAC is the international body overseeing international music royalties and payments. And I was on the global policy committee of that organization and the chair of its AI and copyright group. So that's how it started. And then obviously William Fry realized that there might be something to this AI thing, and that's how my relationship started there. And I've been here since May 22. I started a PhD on AI and copyright in 2020, which I'm planning on handing in come hell or high water, just to be done with it in a few weeks. So yeah, and I'm also on the AI Advisory Council appointed by Minister Cleary. And we've had 2 meetings so far, and it's really great and looking really positive. And I'm really excited about the next 2 years and the mandate of the council, and really excited about advising the government and helping, the public sector get to where it needs to be in relation to AI. So look, in terms of my day-to-day work, I mean, we're really at the cutting edge in William Fry. We're seeing stuff and advising on stuff that's going to be here in 6 months or 12 months. We have the benefit of being able to see the early trends. Like a big thing that's taking off now is data licensing, that organizations are realizing, hey, our data is worth a lot of money, and just carrying out due diligence on their data to be able to license it to AI companies so that they can use that data to legitimately train AI systems. IP issues are huge. And the dark horse of all of this is data protection. It hasn't gone away, It's going to become really important in relation to AI. People haven't, I've taken the eye off the ball a little bit because there's other more pressing issues, but it's really significant. Then, of course, there's the AI Act, which is being voted on in a week in Parliament. And all of the things that go along with that. So an exciting time to be a lawyer working in this area. And as I said, I'm really looking forward to this chat this afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Barry. I have to say I'm a bit offended there now because Octopus's Garden was one of my favourite Beatles songs. So I'm standing up for Ringo here. Laura, I think we'll ask you to introduce yourself next, if you wouldn't mind. Thanks a million.
So, hi everyone, my name is Laura Plunkett. I'm a Programme Manager with CeADAR, which is Ireland's Centre for AI. I'm specifically programme managing a really nice programme that's come our way called the European Digital Innovation Hub. So because of CeADAR's track record for 10 years delivering AI projects for businesses and organisations, they put themselves forward for the nomination as an EDIH. The EDIH programme is basically so that we can support both businesses and public sector organisations to use AI, and they're 100% discounted services. So they're funded by the Digital Europe programme in Europe, and they're funded by Enterprise Ireland using the Recovery and Resilience Fund. The idea of the EDIH programme, which is, I'm just really enjoying working on it because it's really satisfying and tangible. We are basically hand-holding people through, they might come to us with an idea of an AI project they want to do, but the risk and the investment that it would take to do it themselves is too difficult and too onerous. So by doing a test before invest service with us, whether it's a public sector organisation, to prove that the proof of concept or prototype works first. That's ultimately the aim of it. And by doing this process with us, it's a very guided process. We do what's known as a digital maturity assessment to see where the organisation is at today, where it might want to invest in the future, and then testing the AI project. Maybe we also notice that your teams need some educational, some training in AI. So we're training people at an executive level, business users, so anyone using any systems, processes, and people on any daily basis, and then also people that we're kind of calling your AI ambassadors, so people that are just really enthusiastic about AI and getting it right for whatever organization you're part of. So the program has, I suppose, a lot of scope, but maybe, Philip, I might just touch on one project that CeADAR has already done pre-EDIH, so before we had this service available for public sectors organizations on a funded basis. We had two types of projects, for example. We worked with the national television provider that was looking to basically monitor gender on a real-time basis. And they came to us not knowing where to start and how to scope out the project. And it was done and worked with us, and a computer vision model was used. It was 15,000 worth. It was funded by cash, but they wouldn't have been able to do it without CeADAR experts in the room. And that's really where CeADAR comes in. They've got really strong data science team. And Francesca, I hear you setting up a team there, and you know what it's like getting the expertise in the room. You kind of beg, borrow in between them, keeping them in with you these days. Another project just to touch on, and maybe it's to your later question from you, Philip, is this kind of idea that CeADAR is supporting businesses and public sector organisations. But we've already been doing that with them working together. For example, a consultant came our way wanting to do a project for a public sector organisation. So they used their innovation voucher to then work on a project for the public sector organisation, which is actually the local government and heritage group. And it was analysing planning data. But maybe that wouldn't have been able to be done if they hadn't collaborated and got that over the line with CeADAR. So that's what CeADAR is all about, really, is just doing the projects with yourselves, the organisations, and improving processes by AI, not removing people, just letting them work on something a little bit more exciting. So maybe I'll leave it there for now.
Thanks, Laura. And yeah, just to say that us within our department, we do try to, I suppose, give people, I suppose, a little bit of assurance around AI themselves, and we can offer some initial advice, but we tend to bring people over to Laura afterwards if it's getting a little bit complicated for us. So so just to let people know, if they ever do want to get in touch, if they have an idea about a project, we can put them in touch as well. So I'm going to hand over now to Aoife. Aoife, it's not even a week since we've seen each other, so yeah. Let's say this. I think this speaks to the skills issue, and everyone really wanting to upskill in this area. So you might just tell people who you are and what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi everybody. First of all, thanks for having me along. I'm delighted to be here. So I suppose to talk a little bit about. So my name is Aoife Darcy. I'm CEO of a company called Krisolis. And here at Krisolis, we help organisations basically embed what I call all things data into what they do. So using data science, AI, machine learning, and everything in between. I suppose personally, my AI journey started probably back in 1996. I found myself in college and through a process of elimination, managed to get a degree in computer science and statistics. So two subjects that marry themselves really well in the area of AI. And so before kind of AI was, we studied it in computer science, but it wouldn't have been where it is today. I was really lucky then to get a consultancy job with a company called SAS, again, kind of by luck. And I got to work on some really amazing machine learning projects all through the early 2000s, where I was working with organizations, helping them, use their big data sources. It tended to be government departments at the time, telcos, retail, were the real kind of people who were using, I suppose, a lot of these machine learning and AI methods. In 2008, I suppose, to my own belligerence, I'd say, I kind of started to realize that a lot of organizations were struggling with embedding these tools and techniques within their organizations, and not because there was a lack of will, not because there was a lack of kind of wanting to do it, but mainly because they were lacking the in-house capabilities. A lot of people bought in skills, and I was one of the skills they bought in. We would have developed good solutions for them, but when we left, all that knowledge with us, and I always felt there was a void. So that's why I set up Krisolis, to really help organizations with that gap from sometimes tools that they've already have, helping them using them better, or sometimes if they want to embark and embrace kind of data science, AI, machine learning, to help them do that in a kind of a structured way, but with using their staff in-house. So we've been really lucky. I kind of sometimes look at our customer list, and I'm really lucky with the organizations we get to work with. Some of them public sector. As Will have said, we've been working with Deeper over the last couple of years on some of their programs. One of them, the AI Cert, which actually started back with an idea between myself and the head of Women in AI at the time, to try and make AI open and inclusive. Our initial instance of our AI Cert, it's a 12-week program that is open to anybody. So you don't need a technical background, you don't need to know how to do things. And what's been really lovely about that program, it started under ICT SkillNet, and we've also run it in conjunction with Philip's department for public service. And what's really nice about that, when you open up AI and AI skills to anybody, anybody can come along and learn about it. It is amazing what people could do, and even in 12 weeks. It blows me over every time. I'm blown away by what students can do and what people in that short time can take on and learn. So that's really what kind of we're about. And I suppose the AI Cert is a really good example of the types of programs that we run with organizations. Obviously they're publicly available, but we also do in-house programs. So we have some wonderful clients, so the likes of the European Central Bank, Expenditure, KPMG, who we work with, and we do similar kind of in-house programs where we help them develop their teams in-house. And I suppose similar to Laura, we work with people from executive level to business level to then, I suppose the nerds in the room, they also need training sometimes. So those deep technical skills as well. So, we've been really lucky, and I've been really lucky over the years to work with wonderful teams with wonderful data. And, I suppose that's where we come to this, and I suppose where I come to today from that real kind of skills and enhancements. So I think that'll do for now, Philip. I'm sure.
Thanks a million, Aoife. That's great, and yeah, we have a fantastic working relationship with Aoife in Krisolis, and I think we've put through over 100 people on the accredited program, and people have come up with some really good potential projects. So they're the types of thing that we'd like to pipeline then into Laura's area as well. So we're gonna start off. I think everybody, there's a lot of public servants on this call or on this session today, and they will be getting anxious, I think, about the forthcoming EU AI Act. So in as much as it can be done, Barry, could you give us a little whistle-stop tour of the AI Act, and what does it mean for public service bodies, and critically, what do we need to be doing now to get ready for its enactment?
Well, the AI Act is it's like a first of its kind piece of legislation seeking to regulate artificial intelligence. It's taking a risk-based approach. So what that means is that it's addressing the issues of AI in terms of severity of risk that they pose. So primarily it's divided up into unacceptable risk and high risk. So in terms of AI systems that are deemed unacceptable risk, they are going to be prohibited under the AI Act. Now, the final vote is due on the 13th of March in the European Parliament. There's going to be then a kind of a technical approval in April once the lawyer linguists have reviewed it. So it's looking like April that it'll be passed, and we're looking at end of May for the AI Act to come into force. 6 months after it comes into force, the provisions in relation to prohibited systems will apply. So what are prohibited systems? Some examples would include emotional recognition systems in the workplace or in education. There was a provision that said physiological recognition as well, of physiological features, but Airbus actually lobbied heavily there and got that taken out, because Airbus have this AI system in their airplanes that can detect when a pilot is tired, and that got taken out. So that's one feature. AI systems which use subliminal techniques to manipulate people's emotions, that's going to be prohibited. Certain types of profiling, inferring protected characteristics, and of course facial recognition and law enforcement is going to be prohibited as well, save for exceptional circumstances which are outlined in the legislation as well. So as I said, it's 6 months to comply with those. So what we're saying to organizations is that, look, at the very least, you just need to go through the motions and, you know, review your AI systems and say, okay, tick, 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 none of these are prohibited AI systems. Because the fines for prohibited AI systems are bigger than GDP, or it's 35 million or 7% of global turnover. Then there's high-risk AI systems. So the rules around high-risk AI systems are going to be applicable from about mid-2026. So there's about a 2-year period to get to grips with them. It's likely that the public sector will be affected by high-risk AI systems, and I'll go into why. Before I go into why, just to explain what is meant by high-risk AI systems and who it applies to. So it applies to primarily the providers of these systems. They're generally the developers of the systems, and it also applies to users of those systems, referred to the AI Act as deployers. So, you know, sometimes we encounter clients who go, oh, well, look, we're fine, we're not going to be affected by this at all, we're only subscribing to this software. But if you're subscribing to it, you're using it. If you're using it, you have user obligations under the AI Act. So that's something to consider. You know, you don't have to be developing these AI models or systems. You could just be using off-the-shelf software, and it'll affect you as a user. And if there's rules in relation to distributors and importers and so on as well, we won't get into that today. So in terms of what is a high-risk AI system, high risk is divided up into two. The first type of high-risk AI system relates to regulated products like medical devices, in vitro medical diagnostic devices, machinery covered by the EU machinery regulations. The rules on that type of high-risk AI system, where the AI is a safety component in those regulated products, those rules won't be in place until actually mid-27. But for the bulk of the high-risk systems that will be applicable from mid-26, that relates to a part of the AI Act called Annex 3. So there's a number of different areas, you know, profiling based on certain characteristics such as biometric information is going to be considered high risk. Management of critical infrastructure, AI systems used for gas, electricity, water, critical digital infrastructure, that's going to be considered high risk. AI used in education and vocational training. So you might remember during COVID, the debacle with the UK, and they used AI to do the grades for the A levels. And, you know, if you went to a good school, you could not get below a C. And if you went to a bad school in a bad area, you couldn't get above a certain grade. And of course, that just reflected the inherent bias in you know, British society. And that's part of the problem with AI, and that's why these things are considered high risk, because part of it is that level of bias. Vocational training as well is going to be very important. Employment, HR functions, so where AI systems are used for recruitment, selecting people for jobs, posting job adverts. You might think it's benign, but if you think about it, what if the AI makes incorrect inferences off someone's CV? What if there's bias against women, bias against certain races? So if you just feed in a bunch of CVs into ChatGPT or Copilot and tell it, give me the best candidate here, it would actually do a very good job of giving you the best candidate. That's the funny thing, but there might be bias, which would make that a high-risk activity. And then, of course, there's high-risk activities that are specific to the public sector. So AI systems that are used for access to and enjoyment of essential private services and essential public services and benefits, those are going to be considered high-risk AI systems. So where public authorities are using this, or it's not just public authorities, but if it's on behalf of public authorities as well. So if any of your work is subcontracted out, that's going to be caught as well. And that, like, if an AI is used to evaluate the eligibility of people for public assistance benefits, services, healthcare services, and the ability to grant, revoke, reclaim those services. That's all going to be considered as high-risk AI. Of course, AI used in law enforcement is going to be considered high risk, and AI used in migration and border control is going to be considered high risk. So these are all areas which are captured specifically by public bodies, but then you have to consider all the other parts that apply to everyone else, which will also apply to the public sector. And then the final part of the AI Act is in relation to general purpose AI models. So you're talking about the likes of ChatGPT, the likes of Google's Gemini, these large language models that are able to do a wide variety of different tasks. And the rules in relation to those are going to apply from mid next year. So they'll have a 12-month implementation time. The main rules around them are primarily transparency related. So what are the main obligations in terms of high-risk AI systems? Human oversight, having a human in the loop. Data governance is essential. So ensuring that the data on which the AI is trained is appropriate. Like the CSO will be very important factoring in all of this as well, because look, the fact is that Ireland is a very homogenous country demographically compared to other countries, and that if you imagine the bell curve of an Irish, demographic graph, if you are on the edges of that bell curve, you may not be sufficiently represented. So if you consider Irish healthcare data, Irish social welfare data, Irish tax data, if the data is so homogeneous, it may not be adequately capturing the peripheries of the demographics, and there may be inherent bias. So I think countries like Ireland that are particularly homogeneous demographically need to be more wary of that. I think data governance in that sense is especially important in Ireland, because you have to ensure that the data is suitable. An example I always give is that imagine if you had a medical diagnostic tool that was doing diagnoses of people's chest x-rays, but that was trained on a population from Japan. Ireland, because of a genetic quirk, we are more likely to have cystic fibrosis, for example. So, is an Irish population the same as a Japanese population? Is it appropriate to use an AI trained in a totally different population for health purposes in Ireland? These are issues that need to be considered as well. Transparency is one of the main aspects of the AI Act. It is in terms of information provision, giving access to information, explainability is going to be very important. Robustness and cybersecurity is very important as well. We saw with the HSC and the cyber attack there, but you can imagine with AI, it's going to become even more pressing, because there's new and novel ways in which AI systems can be attacked, data can be poisoned, and there may be gaps in terms of utilizing AI systems for those purposes. And then, of course, there's logging of events, keeping of technical documentation, just being able to have a paper trail. And again, it all goes back to the transparency, explainability, and having a human in the loop. Those are the main themes and obligations and responsibilities under the AI Act. And finally, one of the main aspects would be risk management. So basically taking whatever steps you can take to mitigate and ameliorate the risk as much as possible, not just identifying the foreseeable risks, but identifying foreseeable misuses of AI systems as well, and trying to mitigate the risk of foreseeable misuse of those systems. So that's kind of a whistle-stop tour of what the AI Act is and what it applies to. And I'm sure many of you will have questions in the comments. Please feel free to ask me anything, and I'll get to them shortly, I'm sure.
Thanks a million, Barry. I think there's a fair bit for us to consume there anyway. Frankie, I might just move on to you now. I suppose, look, data is often described as the lifeblood of AI, and I suppose as one of the country's biggest public service data controllers, what lessons can you impart for other public servants on how we make our data AI ready?
I mean, interestingly enough, it's not necessarily terribly different to what we should be doing anyway. If you, for any of the data, it's really about trying to make sure your data is of good quality, it's accurate, it's up to date, and really underpinning a lot of that is trying to use common data standards. So the Central Statistics Office has a role, we call it data stewardship, but what that's really about is trying to help the public service and beyond about being, looking after your data, providing high, good quality data. And part of that is about trying to use common standards around data. So if you're trying to bring and train these models, if you think about a particular variable, so I don't know, marital status might be one, and it's called marital status over in one particular department, it's called something else, and actually it's got different meanings, and people have different types of marital status, single, divorced, never divorced, and so forth. So what we're trying to do is try and agree what those common standards can be, so that when we're using data in any instance, but also in these models, that we're talking about the same things, and therefore, as we train the models, then it's using good quality data to underpin it. And I guess the great thing about that is that if you improve the data quality for the use of AI, then you're also going to be improving the quality for the frontline delivery of those services anyway. And you're also going to help be able to, in terms of if you need to exchange data between different departments, again, it becomes more straightforward because you're using a common set of standards. So I think those are the things that we're particularly interested in Central Statistics Office. The other thing that Barry did also touch on, and I mentioned, is very much about bias. So if you're using AI, you absolutely need to make sure that your data includes the whole of the group of people that you're looking to support. So if some of your communities aren't represented in that data, then your models aren't going to work. And Barry touched on health. I mean, a real example that I consider is that when you're going in as a female into hospital and you're having a heart attack, you have different symptoms to men. And if you're using AI to help support health workers in trying to spot whether somebody's having a heart attack or not, effectively, that used to be, here's a list of symptoms, and there are symptoms for men, not for women who do have different symptoms. So therefore, if you're not using, if you haven't got that complete set of data, then you're going to have bias in the algorithms that you're using as well. And I guess the other thing is it is very difficult. It's very difficult to keep things up to date. It's quite resource heavy. So that's something to try and consider about. Almost the more data that you've got, the bigger the potential in terms of having those models. But it becomes very difficult and quite hard to manage. So I think those are the key things for me. It's not massively different. It's about having good quality data. It's about keeping it up to date. It's about using common standards. It's about making sure that you don't have bias within your data. And if you can get all those things right, then it's going to be an advantage in many different ways.
Right, thank you very much, Frankie. Sorry, I think there was a little bit of white noise coming from you there. You might want to put on a headset for your next question. That wasn't just me, was it? Nod if that was someone else. Yeah, okay, yeah. So, okay. So, Aoife, I'm gonna turn over to you next. You've been working obviously with us in Depender in upskilling, people from management board level, budget owners, and people at all levels of the organization. And I suppose, and I see it in the Q&A there. What are the key areas that we need to focus on in terms of upskilling and reskilling to make ourselves ready for the AI revolution?
Yeah, so I suppose the first phrase that always comes to mind when people talk about, upskilling is that, you know, AI is a team sport. Okay, you cannot develop and evolve kind of AI solutions within any organization just by using technical skills, and it has to be seen not just as a technical project. So when you're endeavoring to embed AI into various aspects of your business, you know, you need to look at it holistically. So therefore you need to look at your training plan holistically. So you can't just think about just those technical skills. They are important, but I actually think they're not that they're the easiest skill to kind of look at, but it's very defined, you know, what's needed in those technical skills. And also you can work alongside teams like, you know, in CeADAR, like, you know, Laura has, that sometimes those skills you can acquire, you know, when you need them. But actually when you look at the wider, you know, team that's needed to work on any kind of AI initiative. So first of all, you need senior management. So senior management are going to need to have buy-in to kind of any projects when you look at the strategic level. So to some level, they're going to need to be educated in the space of what's possible, what's not possible, the risks versus the potential. In terms of, as an organization, how you want to think about embracing AI, where does it fit within your organization? So from that strategic level, your senior management, you know, team needs to be educated. And, you know, I've worked with kind of many senior management teams, and on occasion you have people who see it as that sits in IT, you know, that sits over there, I don't need to worry about it, but actually they do. So I think that's really, really important, is thinking at the top, and really if you get it right at that level, it then filters down. So then you think about, you know, projects, that all projects need support. Okay, so when I look at the supports, you look across the legal teams. I mean, Barry is here talking about a whole load of, you know, legality that's coming down the tracks, but also exists within GDPR. So, you know, you need to have those, you know, legal, you know, guardrails in place to make sure that at the very least, you know, whatever you're doing is legally appropriate. Your project managers, so your people who are going to manage these projects, need to have an understanding of, you know, how does an AI project differ from other projects? It's not massively different, but there are some things that you need to think about, particularly in terms of managing the risks, both in terms of throughout the project, but also post-deployment, which is probably, I would say, a little bit different. So like your project managers need to be kind of up to date there, and, you know, your IT teams. I think, you know, when you look at the plethora of tools that are out there, it can just be mind-blowing. And part of the things that the problem and one of the blockers that sometimes, you know, when I talk to teams, their IT teams just are unsure, and their first answer when somebody asks for a new system or a new way of working is no, that's not going to work. But I think, you know, there has to be, I suppose, that give and take, and sometimes that comes from just, you know, capacity. We don't have time to look at it, but also just not understanding. So I think your ICT teams do need skilling in terms of the tools that are here. There's an obvious, I mean, move to cloud, possibly a lot of, particularly in public sector, and rightly so. You know, I mean, data security is really, really important. And no matter what tools you use, you have to make sure those security, kind of those security guardrails are in place. So it shouldn't be ignored, but you possibly need to consider. So that those IT skills, you look at the end users, people using them, we also need skills and skills development in how they're going to use these tools, and particularly use them safely. You know, like we all have the anecdote where, you know, people are like, oh, we're not allowed to use ChatGPT, but you're having it on my phone or having it on my laptop, but you're abusing it anyway. So, you know, we need to make sure that, you know, the policies are in place, and that the end users who are, you know, throughout your organization, who will be using it using these tools will really need to understand what are the things they need to do. And then for me, one of the key groups, and often gets forgotten about in projects, are your subject matter experts. So if you're working on a, you know, a tool for the farming industry, or, you know, for, you know, in the kind of healthcare setting, you need, you know, your farmers or your clinicians or whoever it happens to be part of that project, and part of the project from the beginning. It's no good at the end bringing them into the room and going, we've developed this great tool for you, do you want to use it? And then going, hold on now, how's this going to work? What's, you know, and Also, if you involve them in the design aspect particularly, you're much more likely to develop a tool that is actually fit for purpose. But they, they'll come, if they're a doctor or a nurse or a farmer, they're going to come with their subject matter expert skills. And sometimes it can almost be off-putting for them to be invited to partake in a technical project where they're like, hold on now, they're going to use a whole load of technical, jargon that I'm just not going to understand, and they'll just be, put off, and almost that barrier. So you need to just, make sure that across the organization that people feel educated and supported in this area, so as they can partake. So as when people are saying, we need to transform our organization through AI, that people feel included in that program, as opposed to excluded on, oh, that sounds like a whole load of sci-fi stuff for me, don't understand it, that people feel included. I think, to really embrace kind of the innovative and the potential from AI, you really need to look at that skills development across the board. And not everybody needs to be a Python programmer, by the way, or not everybody needs to understand the algorithms in depth, but they need a level of understanding that allows them to engage at the level they need to for their role. And I just think that's really important. So looking at that broad spectrum, as opposed to those narrow tools, you need some people to program Python, but not everybody. Is that okay, Philip?
Yeah. It wasn't a prompt, but I'm delighted that you brought up that sort of user focus and bringing in users and subject matter experts. I mean, we've been working on design in public services, and particularly user-centered design, and we've recently published an action plan for designing better public services, all around the notion of actually solving problems for individuals rather than doing systems or to people. So that really does it does align well with what we're trying to do in central government. And I suppose it sort of segues nicely into Laura, and that is about, right, we'd all love to do an AI project, but let's do AI projects that actually solve problems and actually make lives of our citizens better. So I suppose, if I'm a public service body, which I am, and I have an AI project that I think will solve a problem, where do I start? What do I do?
So first of all, reach out to us in CeADAR, and we set up a very quick starting half-hour call to make sure that you're coming to the right EDIH. That's our main aim first, is to see what is the problem you're trying to solve, and is CeADAR AI going to be the right one to do it with you. In terms of how we approach it, and it is steps, and I think, Aoife, we are going to be aligned on quite a few points here in terms of the first thing we do is the digital maturity assessment for that person in that organization that they're in. And that looks at everything from the readiness in terms of the strategy of the organization, the humans, are they behind the decision making for the project that you want done? How is your data? How are your systems interoperating? And are you always keeping green decision making in mind as well in terms of any projects you're doing? So there's a number of pillars that we look at in terms of digital maturity assessment. What that helps us do is then map out what we're rephrasing as your AI strategy. So it's making sure that the project that you're looking at doing is actually aligned with the strategy for your organization. And really what that ultimately means is it going to really be of benefit to either you as a team member, as Aoife would say, the business user, or is it actually the citizen that's going to receive the service? Who's winning? Who's getting the benefit at the end of the day? That's ultimately needs to be aligned with your overall strategy. Once we've identified that the project is going to be relevant for your organization and the right direction to go and in line with your strategic objectives, then the next steps is scoping that proof of concept. And I'm just touching on a couple of points you've all said in different ways. The EDIH is very much, we're not here to create something new. If there's already a solution out there, we want you to map to the service providers. It might even be an Irish SME with a product that would be the best service for you. It might be AI tools that are already available or large language models that are open access that you can use. The idea of the EDIH is to match your problem set to those available technologies, prove the concept that it works for your real world challenge, and then ultimately bring it to a prototype phase. And that kind of comes across on a couple of points. And I think in particular, Francesca, you mentioned the data and the cost, and that the prototyping phase allows people to do is see, well, what is the cost if they did move the data to cloud? We can itemize that. We can help them understand, the impact of those decision making. And then ultimately, from CeADAR's perspective, we are in a position then to, I suppose, point you in the right direction for productionizing it. So where you need to go next in terms of your implementation of the project. So Our perspective is come in, have a chat with us. Let's see what the problem is. Let's see if there's a use case out there that's available to use, or do we need to do something bespoke? And if it is a bespoke project, and Philip, maybe I'll just touch on that as well, that mightn't be in with the EDIH stream of work, but CeADAR have other services, and we would obviously work with the public sector organisation to identify the right funding instrument to then do that project in a production environment with them.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. And I actually think that at some point we'll probably be having a conversation around how do we procure AI in a much quicker fashion, because it is quite complex at the moment. But I think that's something that we'll be working on, certainly with our colleagues in this department in the Office of Government Procurement, because that is something that comes up again and again, and people obviously want to engage I suppose this new technology, but there is obviously the fear around procurement. Barry, I want to come back to you again. I want to talk, just touch on something that we, when we were preparing for this call, you talked about how there was there's a moral imperative for the public service to exploit AI for the good of our citizens. And I wonder, could you expand on this and maybe give us your views about where our ambition is in central government, in the public service, where it should be, and what the challenges you see around what we should be prioritizing AI deployment for?
Yeah, I think, like if you look at our national strategy on AI, like we're really pushing for Ireland to become a global centre of excellence for AI. And I think, it's really important to practice what you preach. And part of that is going to be utilising AI to increase efficiency in public service. Again, going to healthcare, because healthcare is a really good example. There's AI systems that can analyze blood tests and identify, up to 140 different biomarkers from a blood test. So you mightn't have a specific screening test for a type of cancer, but if you screen enough people and identify patterns in enough people, which AI would be able to do, then potentially, you're going to be able to bring massive health benefits to people. So I think it's a question of being ambitious in the deployment of the technology and embracing the technology. Like last week, there was an OpenAI event on in Dublin, and some of the senior executives from OpenAI were there. And the head of strategy for OpenAI was saying that he was intoxicated by the welcome that Ireland was giving to AI, and the approach, like the general feeling and openness the country has. And I think this is something we need to capitalize on. I think we're great for talking about how great we are in that sense, but I think we need to put our money where our mouth is, sometimes quite literally in relation to AI usage, and use the technology to identify where we can make efficiencies in the public sector. Because I think, one of the issues that the public sector has is that, there's so much data, there's so much admin to be done, that AI can help with a lot of that and streamline a lot of that. So I think the technology is there, and if we want to make ourselves one of the best in the world when it comes to AI and AI investment, that we should also be practicing what we preach and putting it into work.
Yep, I agree with you on this one anyway, Barry. I think we should be ambitious around this stuff, ambitious in a planned and sort of careful way. I'll always be a civil servant in that regard. Frankie, so look, you're CIO, as I said, of one of our largest data controllers in the public service. AI is always sort of synonymous with the CIO role, but I think as Aoife was saying there, it's not that straightforward. But tell us, like, for other leaders, other CIOs in the public service, what are you doing, and what's your advice for them in terms of getting ready for this big shift in how we're going to work into the future?
And some of the points have probably been covered already. I mean, I think I guess there's probably been a use of sort of AI and machine learning in many organisations, sort of in a data science space, and I do think, as I mentioned earlier, the sort of generative AI, large language models that sort of popped up has kind of really accelerated the use of that. And I think us personally, we're being a little cautious. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing in terms of how we use those models. So I think it was Aoife that touched on sort of security. So for us, understanding those models, and what's very important for us is that we do not push our data outwards, sort of into those publicly available models. So to reassure all of you that provide us with your data, we absolutely, and neither will any other National Statistics Institute ever do that. So we're thinking very carefully about what the right use case is for us in our particular sector, and that is, as I've mentioned, sort of the low risk level. So being able to use it to convert code, to be able to use it on searching on what is already publicly available data, but we certainly wouldn't be wanting our data that we take from administrative systems or surveys to be pushed back out into models. Now, that's not true for every public sector necessarily, but of course, as has been mentioned on a few occasions, we are also subject to GDPR, and we all have a responsibility of keeping our citizens' data secure. So I guess it's thinking quite carefully, what are the safe, secure ways of using the models, solving a problem that somebody mentioned, and that conversion of code could be a real, for us, we're moving from one analytical tool to another, and that could, if we can get it to do the bulk of the work, then that could save significant amount of resource for us and therefore, of course, the taxpayer as well. I mean, and I think also somebody's mentioned a lot of this isn't about technology, it's about having the right governance framework. So we are looking at creating our own best practice and our governance frameworks about how we use AI and machine learning, where we use it, who should be approving that. Obviously, we'll be bearing in mind the Act as well. But I do think, and it kind of goes back to my point, you just because you can do something legally doesn't mean that you should. So therefore, we're thinking very carefully about what the right processes are for saying, yes, we're going to use AI in this particular instance. I also touched on the fact that for us, being transparent, again, I think Barry touched on that, it's one of the very key aspects of this, being transparent about what our algorithms are, being able to explain them. So what do they do? How is the data used? How is it kept secure? And obviously at the CSO, we're not looking at individuals in terms of individual decisions. We're aggregating up data and we're looking for patterns and looking for to provide sort of information for policymakers, decision makers, citizens, businesses, but it's very much at that sort of aggregate level as well. I think somebody touched on, again, I think maybe it was Aoife, around, where is your processing? These models can take huge amounts of compute power. It's unlikely that most of us are going to be able to do it on servers in our own server rooms. You're almost inevitably looking at shared resources, be that in a cloud type environment, or you're sharing resources across government. And there's absolutely a green and sustainability element to that as well. So I do think as the public sector, we need to be looking and working together in terms of, well, which models could we share? For example, I mean, geospatial, Earth observation data, that's huge. There's a European system called Copernicus that looks at that, and we really should be looking at using shared platforms wherever we can, rather than trying to reinvent wheels and so forth. I'd also say for us, you don't necessarily, again, I think it was Laura, sorry, I can't remember, Laura, who mentioned you don't necessarily need to develop your own models yourself. There are publicly available ones. And when we first started looking at the code conversion, we thought, oh, we'll train our own model. And we did some work on it. By the time we'd done that, there was another version out there, and it was a complete, I'm glad we did it. We learned from it, but we also learned that you don't need to do it yourself. So I would also recommend look at what's publicly available first, and then only then do you, again, it goes back to using those shared resources. I've also, Aoife's covered all about the skills. I would agree with everything she said, you know, skills throughout the organisation, technology. We're also very much talking about other organisations in the same space as us. I mentioned that one-stop shop that we're leading on. That is all about sharing resources across Europe. I also regularly talk to other stats office in the UN as well. So we're trying to, where we can, the UN have shared data platforms as well. So I think that's incredibly important. And then lastly, again, I think it's been touched on, you need human beings involved in this. You need to have people, it's a bit like anything you do on analytics. If the outcome looks odd, it's probably because there's something wrong with your data or there's something wrong with your algorithm. So you absolutely need to have humans in the loop. You need to have that assurance. You need people testing and checking those models to make sure that the outcomes are of the quality that they need to be. So those are all the things that we're looking at the moment. I hope you can hear me better. I should have said.
Yeah, no, it's perfect now. Thanks, Frankie. And actually, yeah, I just want to pick up on something you said there. And I mean, we have, you know, climate action plans, and on one hand, you know, you have the impact that AI could have in helping us to solve some of our climate issues. But then on the flip side, and this is actually Eamon's question, in the Q&A here, is, you know, the energy consumption associated with AI. So Aoife, I suppose, do you have any thoughts on that? You know, what are the positive things that AI can do for us, maybe in, you know, in solving some of our climate issues, and, you know, what should our concerns be around the deployment of AI and how resource intensive that is, you know, the compute power that's required. Do you have any thoughts on that yourself?
Yeah, no, so I suppose for me, there's a few things to think about with this. So first of all, there just is no getting away. Those large language models, huge. And it's one of the prohibiting factors, because people will say, well, why don't we just build our own? Like, why don't we have an Irish large language model? The costs involved in, one, creating the model in the first place, then keeping it updated, you know, giving access to it, all of that. Like, and when we're talking about energy consumption, we're talking about energy consumption that could possibly run a small country. Like, we're not talking about small amounts of energy. So I think, and with a lot of these kind of development of new tools, I always find that there comes a point where there's the can we do this kind of approach. So, and I always got this very academic approach to the world, where you look at something and you go, that's kind of hard. I wonder can we do it? And you figure out that we can. And we've now looked at, you know, the likes of ChatGPT and those large language models. What is achievable with those? We now know what we can do. So the next question we have to ask ourselves is it worth it? So we have to really consider, you know, what do these tools bring to the table, but what are the costs involved? And there comes that kind of cost benefit analysis that we invariably have to get to. And I also think that some of these companies are going to get there because, you know, the amount of money they must be spending, and the investment that's going into the development of these models, how sustainable is that? So while we all go, oh, we can just, you know, log on to ChatGPT and we can get an API and off we go, you know, at what point is that going to be chargeable and what are the costs likely to be? So for organizations, I think one of the things you have to think about, the sustainability question will lead into the future costs question. That you develop these tools and people go, oh, it's open source and we can just, you know, log in, there's an API, and then all of a sudden, you know, in 6 months, a year time, a provider decides that, well, actually now you have to pay for that. So I do think that those two kind of questions go a little bit hand in hand. And in terms of that IT infrastructure, when you're looking at it, you know, thinking about the vendors that you're using, particularly if you're embedding tools that are currently seem not that expensive, the costs of building these are huge. So I do think that part of that question will eventually, you know, come to the head when these companies have to fund it, not just from investment, but actually from profits and kind of the income they're generating. So I think that's one area that definitely, I think from the sustainability side, and I suppose the negatives, kind of thinking a little bit about it, from the positives, from an Ireland Inc. point of view, and I suppose to touch on something that Barry talked about, that idea of, kind of talking the talk and walking the walk. I actually think a lot of what we talk about are the inward potentials. So we think about, kind of efficiencies in the services we already provide. And I think there's definitely, kind of scope there. But sometimes, like, what about the outward potential? I think sometimes we don't necessarily, think big enough. Like, we're a little old country, but I think there's lots we can do. And one of the areas that I think about all the time is agriculture. So we're constantly, and that sustainability kind of question within agriculture, when we look at that, is there a space for AI? And I think inwardly we look at it and we go, absolutely. I'm under no I fully think that there's definitely a use for AI to make, let's say, farming more sustainable. And that's at inward looking. But if we think about it outwardly, we think, well, what if we could develop solutions in Ireland using the amazing subject matter expertise that we have within our farming communities? Like, our farmers are amazing at what they do. So what if we can utilize that to develop tools that we can bring to the world, so that Ireland can become the centre of excellence for looking at sustainable farming and developing solutions in that area, but also allow our farmers to benefit from that. So when we're telling them they have to become more sustainable, possibly cut down the amount of output they create within their farms, what if they became IT creators on the side? And we set kind of tech co-ops up where they could be part of teams, but also benefit financially from products that were developed here using their subject matter expertise, our technical expertise that we know we have, and then outsource that, so that solutions developed here can make, Brazil's farming, kind of more sustainable. So we can look at developing tools here using the subject matter expertise and the technical skills that we have to make, like, whole industries, but not just within Ireland. Look, like, we can make a whole industry worldwide better, but using those subject matter expertise and allowing, I think, like, farming for me is kind of really obvious. I'm like, imagine if, like, farmers could diversify their income and, by kind of being part of projects and then, getting income back from that, and offset that against some of the, the income they may lose from making their, their farms more sustainable. So I think there's huge scope here. And, as Barry said, for, making Ireland a centre of excellence. So not just in terms of the efficiency and how we do things, but also possibly changing the way we do things, not just internally, but looking at a wider scope. So some ideas there, hopefully they're useful.
Yeah, and like you say, I mean, the large language models and those sort of resource intensive models they really are the topic du jour, and you kind of wonder if that's a bit of a distraction given the amount of other stuff we could be doing with different types of AI that I suppose are less harmful to the environment. And I just want to maybe ask Laura at this point, I mean, you work not only with public service bodies on potential projects or challenges that they're facing that could be solved using AI, but you also work with SMEs, and we've a thriving SME sector in Ireland, and high potential startups, tech specialists. And I suppose, are there ways that we can be working in the public sector with those SMEs on AI problems, grow our indigenous enterprise sector here, solve problems for the public service, and hopefully then export abroad, really good solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe there's a couple of things going on there, and I'll try and get to all of them. But in terms of the EDIH role that we have, a part of it, and I hope I'm using the right language, is that matchmaking element that we very much see happening. So that if a public sector organisation has come up with an idea that needs to be solved, and the tech isn't there yet, there's no reason why we can't go to a market to say, we're hosting an event We're bringing SMEs that are interested in coming in and solving in this problem. And the way we see it working is two ways. It's maybe at an event and networking and matchmaking, but maybe there's already a startup that's actually been looking at it themselves already, and they might be ready for what we're running as accelerator programs in partnership with Nova to help those startups get their idea off the ground and get them invested by venture capitalists and angel investors who have a little bit more money to put in the pot, to really help those small Irish businesses solve the problems. So, for example, I know at the moment in our accelerator program this year, we've put in basically that there's a couple of areas that we hoped would be focused on, and one being EdTech and one being health. Just jumping to mind of the two that are there. And there's many other areas that we're looking at, because we absolutely know that there are so many issues within those sectors that need to be fixed per se. And hopefully these startups will have the right ideas for that. In terms of the matchmaking at the European level, maybe it's just a worthwhile touching on this. So in the EDIH network, there's also the opportunity to collaborate with other EDIHs. So for example, I can take part in thematic working groups, particularly on public administration, where similar need sets are being raised and similar issues, and we can then cross-learn and take those lessons back, so that if we're looking at a problem here in Ireland, perhaps they're trying to do the exact same thing in Spain, and maybe there's some collaboration efforts to reduce the crosswork that's been done and just move forward in a more cohesive way. So I hope I've covered a few things there, Philip, but just that there's a lot going on. And maybe just one point that I haven't had a chance to say, but I think the AI Act seems to be the word or two words of the day, week, month, year. CeADAR are very active in this space by partnering with DETI on trying to come up with the guidelines for use of generative AI in the public sector at large. But the SME sector has been coming literally to the door on a daily basis saying, help guide us on this. So CeADAR are also going to be like yourselves, Francesca, trying to be in that space and to make sure that we're guiding both the public sector and the SME on this.
Okay, I'm gonna do a question to all of you, and just give us your thoughts and sort of if this is gonna sound like Gay Born in the Meaning of Life, you're at the pearly gates, whatever. If you're brought in to the cabinet, right? We break the rules, we bring you in and say, right, yeah, you have a few minutes in front of the cabinet here to discuss AI, and what part of the public service do we need to have the biggest disruption using AI? What would you say? You have 2 minutes in with the cabinet. What would you say to them about AI and what we should be doing? I'm going to start off with Aoife.
Hey, Philip, right, so my 2 minute elevator elevator pitch for the government. So I would say we look at where we're strong. So my big thing, we look at where we were really strong with subject matter expertise. We look at farming, we look at health, we look at education. We have amazing educators, we have amazing healthcare workers, we have amazing farmers who are real subject matter expertise. And we can really look at those areas, take those subject matter expertise, marry them with the technical skills that we have. We have great innovation centres. We look at the likes of Inside Adapt, CeADAR, fantastic academic institutions that are, looking at research in this area. And if we can marry those two and get the formula right, a little bit of Irish magic sauce on top of that, a bit of storytelling, and I think we have real potential to become, a real centre of excellence. As I said, not just for inward looking, but for outward looking. So I think it's focusing on those areas where we have subject matter expertise and we can fly. Absolutely.
Barry, what's your pitch to the government?
I'll swing for the fences. Like go hard or go home. I just really, if there was a pitch, would be to really embrace this. I think if there's one area, and we keep coming back to it, it would be health, because I think that is so dependent on data and so dependent on information, and that also causes much of the bottlenecks. Is that so much efficiency could be introduced into the healthcare system by introducing AI, health outcomes could be improved, triage even can be improved, allocation of resources can be improved. There's so much small little things which would free up time and free up money, and that alone would lead to such massive improvements in the healthcare sector. Never mind then using AI as part of the actual health service provision, and from a healthcare perspective with new medical technologies that are coming online. So, you know, if I was dictator for a day, I'd instill a Manhattan Project type program for the Irish healthcare system and open up Ireland to the world and say, we want to have the world's first AI-driven healthcare system. We are willing to pilot whatever needs to be piloted with the top technology. We're willing to spend the money that needs to be spent. And, you know, it sounds crazy, but within 10 years, Ireland could have probably one of the top healthcare systems in the entire world. And I know that sounds grandiose, but it's also possible if we put our minds to it. So that would be my pitch.
Okay, a nice moonshot there. Frankie.
Yeah, so I think my pitch would be, so if you think about, I suppose, what's happening in the world today, and you know, the complexity of the issues that we're all trying to face, both within Ireland, but more generally. So so this is probably somewhere in the Milky Way. But I think fundamentally, the way to try and, I suppose, identify solutions for those problems, and we just kind of look at the amount of misinformation that's going on, you know, the concerns over, you know, democracy, you know, are our democracies even going to be able to stand up to this? For me, the two key ways of overcoming those are education, which I think is absolutely fundamental, and data, and having good, high quality data. And AI is the one way that potentially we can try and bring that data together, make sense of that data. Now, you have to have so many guardrails around that in terms of ethics, and, as you know, all the points that we've raised around bias and so forth. But I think for us, in terms of that's what it's there. It's a mountain of information. It's understanding. So I'm kind of going with Barry's health, but just saying, oh, well, why can't we go bigger than that? Because I think that's what this is about. It's about providing data and insight for those big, complex societal world problems that we're struggling with. And I think investing in getting both the technology that's required, but in getting the high quality data that requires us to be able to come up with models that can actually provide that insight. So that's my pitch.
Thanks, Frankie. Laura, your AI Dragon's Den moment in Merrion Street.
Oh, I tell you what, you've all stolen the lines there, but I'm glad to see that there's so many people on the call agreeing on something for a change. I think that Ireland has the opportunity. The way I look at it is, you know, a good reputation of a company is if their health system is right? Like it's when you can say you're from somewhere and the health system is working well. And that's because it's tangible for humans, us people. So regardless of the AI and the tech, I'm going to benefit, I will live longer, someone else's life will be saved, queues will be improved, and people will feel the difference. And I think that's the real opportunity, where if AI and Ireland are front runners using AI, we will get there and we will have an improved service for the human at the end of the chain. That's my ultimate pitch.
Okay, we're moving into the quickfire round now, so we'll we've some questions from the audience. So Barry, I'm going to start off with you. How can we correct data to remove bias, and does overcorrecting cause problems too? So less than a minute.
Well, that's actually a technical question. It's not a legal question. I mean, the whether or not there's bias is about what's contained in the data. So it's like the data scientists you need to get in touch with in relation to that, and there are technological solutions for that. But I'm afraid it's one of the ones.
Yeah, I think it might. That might have been for Frankie. Sorry about that. Frankie, do you have a view on the data bias and how to correct it?
I mean, I suppose fundamentally it's about trying to get as much data as you can, and spending a lot of time testing and training those models. So and that requires human intervention. So and there are technical solutions into, you know, trying to go into deep learning and other sort of techniques that you can apply. But fundamentally, yeah, it's about trying to gather as much data as you can. You need to do the quality assurance on, and there are certain technical solutions that can help you do that. It does have to be underpinned by common data standards as well. So having the right skills. Sorry, it's a bit, at that high level, that's what you're talking about, is paying attention and making sure that you've got the right testing involved, I think is absolutely critical. So therefore the models are coming out as you would expect it. And also I would say one thing is you need diversity in the people that create the models as well. Because we're all biased, we're all human beings, we all have our own bias, and therefore I think to make sure in your technology teams you have diversity of thought, diversity of experience, communities, I think that's absolutely vital, because otherwise you're almost inevitably going to end up with bias in your model. So that broader involvement I think is critical.
Yeah, sorry, I problem there was reading my own handwriting, so obviously I should be replaced myself by AI. But Barry, the question to you is actually around an organisation is looking to introduce AI into a process, and is there a need then to carry out a data protection impact assessment, which you'll know is a tool used by DPOs or data protection officers to test the risk that's involved?
Well, under the GDPR, there's already an obligation to carry out a DPIA, where you're using new technology to process large amounts of information. DPIAs are also a requirement in relation to certain aspects of the AI Act, in addition to obligations under the GDPR. So I'm afraid it's a bit of a cop-out answer, but organizations need to assess the situation themselves in order to identify if they meet the criteria requiring them to carry out a DPIA. But you can envisage, of course, that it's a type of situation in which it may be required for sure.
Okay, Laura, what are the projects or sectors the EDIH are particularly interested in and resourced to work on for AI projects? Or is there any area?
Yeah, maybe I'll flip it the other way. We don't want to be sector specific. CeADAR has worked in many sectors and we have the expertise to be able to deal with them all. So the way we are going is that any organisation with an issue, come in and talk to us. If we're not the right EDIH for you specifically with AI only, there are other EDIHs which have a focus on, for example, circular economy, cybersecurity, high performance computing. So we can map you to a conjoined service with both, but ultimately just come in and talk to us and see what the issue is, and we'll go from there. That's all I'm saying.
Thanks very much, Laura. Dara has asked, and I'm going to give this one to Aoife. What do you see as the main disadvantages in AI use in the civil and public services?
Biggest one is trust. So I think there is a risk. It's really important that our public services are trusted. So I think on the back of all of the potential, we constantly have to be checking about making sure that any system we create is trustworthy. So the AI Act helps with that. It puts kind of a bit of a framework around it. But I think the biggest risk in public service is that there's the potential to do something that will somehow underline the trust within systems. And just a little bit going back to biases and that, I suppose it's kind of linked to that, is that first of all, you should be always testing for biases. So even if your data isn't biased, you should always be testing for bias as part. So the models are not creating bias output. So that's kind of one thing. And doing that all the time. And the other thing is to think, in some instances, you can't avoid it. So what you have to look at is the wider implementation, and can you put a human in the loop, or can you put a process in place that allows to mitigate for the risk of that bias? So it's not always about fixing it at the data end. Sometimes you can fix it at the implementation end. But the first thing you have to realize is that it exists. But definitely in terms of risk and biases comes into that, all of that comes into that trust. It's the biggest risk. So no matter what you're doing, it's putting those checks and balances in place to make sure any solution you're creating, any technology solution, not just AI, is trustworthy. So that would be my take on that.
Thanks. Just before I get into the wrap up, and I see there's a question here from Debbie, and it sort of touches on something that we had when we were talking in preparation for this, for today's event. And I had said, it's the Wild West with AI, and Barry, I think you said, no, it's not. There's an entire legislative framework out there that you have to comply with. And Debbie asked this question, is there enough awareness out there on our compliance with other legislation? And if not, what can we do about it?
Is that for me?
That's for you, Barry. Yeah.
Look, what can you do about it? I mean, part of the remit of the advisory council is the demystifying of AI and the informing the public. One of the strands under the national AI strategy is the provision of information around AI, particularly to the likes of SMEs. So, if there is a lack of knowledge, well, what can you do? You educate. So, that's the only answer. I think more people are becoming interested in the area because of the likes of ChatGPT. I think as we get closer to elections around the world, there'll be an increase in interest around AI, about its potential use in disinformation. Although I personally really question the extent to which AI can be used and is used in terms of disinformation, as opposed to people just outright lying the old-fashioned way. So I think there's going to be a natural inclination towards curiosity about it, but I think it's part of our strategy, that knowledge element. So I think various departments need to be doing the education piece. The government writ large needs to be doing it as a state, and various companies and organizations need to be. It's all about that transparency piece, about ensuring that your customers, your stakeholders, citizens are aware of how they're being impacted by the technology. So it is kind of, I think, voluntary element of transparency will help that education piece.
Thanks a million, Barry, and thank you to all of our panelists for joining us today, and to all of the guests who took the time to join us today on this Thekla Talk. We hope that you enjoyed the event and found our speakers and discussions interesting and thought-provoking. I think this event really provided an expert insight and some really good opinions on using AI and how we can plan and prepare to use AI safely and securely into the future. And certainly the road ahead looks long and winding, but one that is full of opportunity for public service bodies. And I think we heard that mostly through our pitches to Cabinet there. There were a couple of questions or comments that we couldn't get to on the call, but we've taken note of them, and we're going to try and issue a response when we circulate the recording. Delighted with the turnout today at the session, and I think it demonstrates that there is a real desire and a need across our public service to learn more about AI and about how public service bodies can use it safely and use it to transform how we work and deliver our services to the citizens. My team in the department here are currently progressing a number of important initiatives in this space, and we will continue to provide targeted interventions that can support and encourage the use of AI as an enabling solution to really help us enhance efficiencies and ensure better value work and better services for our public. I just wanted to mention that we have delivered the first iteration of upskilling programs to over 400 public servants and senior leaders, and we know that there is a strong need there for more training and upskilling in this area, and we're currently reviewing this training and identifying what other skill sets this might include, but there will be more in this area. We've also recently brought in an SFI fellow, and they're working with us on the team, undertaking a year-long project developing the current interim ethical guidelines for trustworthy AI in the public service. We're also just finalising some high-level guidelines on the use of Gen AI in the public service, and we hope they'll be available very soon. And just to say that we also have supports around funding through the Public Service Innovation Fund, which will be announced shortly, the results of that, but also the Public Service Digital Transformation Fund as well. So look, there's some of the supports that are available to us, to you in the public service, and we do hope that you see to engage with us. Get in touch with the team at any point. And again, I just want to thank you all for taking the time here today, and particularly to Frankie, to Barry, to Laura, and to Aoife. And I just want to say to everyone, enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and goodbye and thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for all the organising.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.